Hey, Steve, good morning. Or, yeah, is it still morning for you or is it evening for you?
It's evening for me. It's five
Okay,
o'clock
perfect.
on a Friday,
There you
so
go.
I
Yeah.
can wait to start my weekend.
So then, yeah, good evening for you. Thanks for joining today.
Awesome, yeah, really excited to be here.
Yeah, like, actually, I was about to say, if you could probably just, like, point on the map where you're located, right? Behind you.
Right up there. I'm just next to my head actually. So
There you go.
yeah,
Yeah.
back in the,
Yeah, you were in the States for a little bit, for a year or two, and then just,
I
or,
was there.
yeah.
Yeah, I was there for 8 years actually. So moved over there in 2013 in Wisconsin. So still part of the user group over there for the Power Platform, part of Power BI Tips. But was over there for 8 years and decided it was time to come back to the UK. So moved
Fair.
over here in the middle of the pandemic. Everything been virtual so far, but looks like we're heading in the right direction. So yeah, excited to be here.
Yeah, well, and like you said, it's these virtual events have been great, but I think we're both very excited to start getting back into person at a lot of the conferences and being able to shake somebody's hand after a presentation. Oh, and wow,
Yeah,
by the way, like your LinkedIn event thing has worked very well. We're at 101 people in the chat, so I have not used that before. I've only promoted on YouTube, but like I am doing this going forward. This is fantastic. So kudos to you
yeah,
for
I love
actually
LinkedIn.
giving me that suggestion. This is fantastic.
Yeah, I love LinkedIn and love talking about version control. So
Yeah,
let's
well, I
go.
think it's a great subtopic under the larger conversation about both tenant and like file governance and security. You know, it goes within actually protecting files. And I know at least I've lost track of the number of times that I come in and like, wait, where are your Power BI files? And I look at a folder and there's like 85 files in there. There's like Susan's and Michael's version, and then version 1.1, 1.1. But it's also the irony is that it's saved in like it's already saved in OneDrive. Like OneDrive has version history. I've lost track of the number of times that I right clicked and shit like, oh, there's a version history, but yeah, it's included in like every online storage has version control, usually at least 6 to 12 months, built in, if not longer for enterprise. That I've very often had to do as like a very basic version of it. But we're going to be talking about certainly a more robust enterprise quality one with like GitHub and just also different ways. What are some easy and then more robust ways to do version control? And
Yeah,
someday, that
for sure.
yeah. So I
No,
think it's something that I think hasn't been talked about too much and can never be talked about enough because it is whether or not it comes with working for developers or rolling back changes or being able to also just work in parallel with files. Like it's a very important cornerstone in Power BI development, certainly. But for people tuning in, for the now 112 viewers tuning in, do you want to give a little background about yourself?
Yeah. So definitely, as I say, Steve Campbell, data platform MVP, Microsoft. So love talking about Power BI is my main thing. Also do a lot in Power Platform. I co-run the Brew City, which is part of the Power BI Tips Power Platform user groups. That's based over in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. So very thankful I can do it from over here in the UK where I am currently. I run that with Anthony Escobedo, who handles a lot of the Power Apps and the flow side of stuff. And I
Yep.
focus on the data Power BI kind of stuff. So together, really looking at how they integrate and all the amazing things you can do. And then I've moved over here for about a year now. So I lead the Power BI team at Cognizant Microsoft Business Group in the UK. So that's my day job. And then I do love talking all things Power BI on Friday evenings as well, though, and weekends. So
Uh,
definitely fun.
I like Thomas's comment. He's drink beer and learn new stuff. I just want to give just a quick mention to the people in the chat. As always, drop questions in there. Considering the number of concurrent viewers we have and probably the rapid pace that the chat's going to go through, I may occasionally miss a question to queue up. So if that does come up, by the end that you haven't had one answered, feel free to drop it in there again. But the general pace will be as Steve and I talk about version control and everything else. Questions related to what he's actually like discussing or demoing, those I'll kind of bring up organically during the presentation. If you have broader questions, you're still welcome to drop them in there, but I usually queue it up on the tool that I have, and then we'll kind of bring them up at the end during a more broader Q&A session. But I'm excited at least to come back to your side of the world later this year. Unfortunately, we won't be crossing paths in Copenhagen, but I've also seen that Alex Whittles, he recently I guess bought a Cessna, so he's said at any point I'm over in the UK that he'll take me on a flight. So I have a higher encouragement now to wanting to get back to somewhere on the island, because at least I get to take a flight around the area for the day, which seems pretty fun.
Yeah, I think everyone's excited to start traveling again. We've made so many friends through these user groups I have as well, and through the community in other countries, and just everyone's absolutely buzzing to go meet each other. Obviously, when it's safe to do so. So yeah, unfortunately I can't make that Copenhagen event, but it looks absolutely amazing. Really jealous of everyone attending.
Well, even as far as this goes, like one of the things that I've loved just about doing these live streams is like this is probably going to be the most time we've hung out together, at any point from uh, And I forget, like, we bumped in somewhere at some point. I know in person. I just can't remember specifically where, but I know we've crossed paths at least at one conference, but never for more than like a bit of a conversation. And I like the chance to be able to just sit with a person and just hang out with them for an hour on these. So I found that ironically, or maybe unironically, I've connected more with the community doing the 36 live streams now that I've done than I have. Maybe it's just as much as I have at the conferences because I've gotten so much more one-on-one time to just get to know people and vice versa through that.
Yeah, it's been fantastic. I mean, the community, how we've all adapted, and I think going forward we'll have the best of both worlds, which is I'm still gonna run stuff from Wisconsin live here, and then we'll meet people up in the conferences.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
lots of opportunity to talk about Power BI.
No, I completely agree. But the getting to the topic at hand, like maybe a little just a bit more background, like what specifically I kind of got you interested to want to like dive in. Like I really want to do a topic on version control.
So it was you hit the nail on the head with all those issues that you mentioned earlier. I think there's really a lot of issues with people emailing files and having the wrong files. And I was working in a team with people. It was I think three or four developers only working on the same file, and it was being emailed back and forth, and we're making changes, and no one really knew what was going on. So I just said, hey, we need to properly version control this using OneDrive, those sort of things. And then looking further, there's the DevOps and the GitHub as you get to enterprise solutions, but these have pros and cons, and there's different areas of version control. You can do the model and report files. So there's a lot that goes into it. And for myself, I came from an Excel, a business background. So this was never something that I really knew that much. And I learned it, learning my Power BI, going through that journey. And I think is a really cool and interesting topic, and one that I don't see as much. So really like to put some stuff out there. There's a great app we made, which is completely free at the end. We'll show, which can help hopefully business users for this as well. So it's really trying to help people out and get this great topic out there in the community.
Yeah, yours is one of the, I'd say nowadays like a dozen or so external tools that I've used that plugs in through the Power BI Tips external tools adder, which is pretty fantastic. It's still like I think that and composite models over Power BI data sets and Azure analysis services. I always have to think to say I still hate the term, but those are the two I'd say most instrumental features in probably the last 5 years to come out for Power BI is additional developer tools and scenarios. So I'm glad that the community so vehemently jumped onto it and just started producing great plugins and new features for external tools.
Yeah, it's been a lot. It's been great. Great tools out there. Absolutely fantastic ones.
Perfect. If you want, I can go ahead and flip over to the other screen. We can get started.
Excellent.
All right, there we are.
Awesome. So we'll go through. I think we've done the introduction here, so we can go through quickly. As I say, I'm Steve Campbell. I went through myself, but this one, please do add me on LinkedIn, Twitter. I love to share. I love to chat with people, and some of the stuff I'm going to be talking about later, I'll be sharing all of those links and those tools later. So LinkedIn is definitely my favorite. Power BI Stable, just search Steve Campbell. So let's look at today's topics. We're going to go through a few things. This is going to be a lot of what, and not so much how to do it technically for some of the items. The reason being, this is a huge topic. There's a lot of tutorials out there to do, but there's just so much. So really what I want to do with this session is look at all the options, look at the pros and the cons of the different options, and let you guys pick and make informed decisions so you know how to implement version control properly. And some of the more techniques, there's already been great sessions out there which I'll refer to, and you can go and see how to technically implement it. So we'll go through things like DevOps, Git, continuous integration. We'll talk a bit about deployment pipelines and a couple of tools, and then look at different options for report files versus model files, which is very different options, how to version control, just to the use of how they're built and how they're created. And then, as I said, we'll look at our Power BI version control app, which is a free Power app from Power BI Tips that can help you with version control, and we'll run through that. So the first one I want to do is look at a model versus a report. Hopefully you've heard this advice before. If not, one of the best pieces of advice is always, especially in enterprise solutions, split out your model versus report. Now, what do I mean by that? This actually happens behind the scenes, really, when you publish any report to the Power BI service. So you have your PBIX file and you publish it. And then what actually happens is you publish both a data set and a report. You'll probably recognize these symbols if you've seen them on the service, but that data set contains the model, so that's the Power Query and the DAX and all the back-end data stuff and the relationships. And then the report only is the visuals. And the good advantage of this, one of the main key advantages, is that you can have many different reports off your data set. So once you've created that Power BI model, and most people call it a model, a service will be called a data set, but they're interchangeable, you can then have several reports built off that same data set, which is great to stop people having one report with 100 pages. You can split that up, and you don't have to recreate the model each time, redo the Power Query and the DAX measures, because that can be managed centrally, and any updates can be pushed through to all reports. So what is a model when we call a model file or a data set? Now there's two main areas you can talk about in a model. The first one is going to be the metadata. And this is just a JSON file actually. And if you're familiar with analysis services, you have model.bim file, similar type of thing. And it is information about data sources, tables, formats, all of this. It's basically all the mapping of how things relate, all your DAX measures, all your Power Query, and it just maps everything and how all these different elements relate together. It's going to be quite small because it has nothing to do with the data itself. It's just on your model, on the relationships you built and the measures. And then of course there's the data. So this is what we're most interested about. It's the tables, the rows, the columns, the actual data from your data sources filling in. And this is the bit that's large in size in a model. An important thing here is that metadata is a code file. It's written in code. It's just a text file. It could be similar to a text file. It's completely code. So what's good about code? Code can be tracked. When we talk about DevOps and Git and version control, what we're normally talking about is code. When I say code, essentially it's text file to its simplest form, some type of text file, maybe saved as a JSON, something like that. But what you can do with these files is you can do things like a difference or schema compare. If you have two different text files, it's quite easy to compare which lines are different. You'll probably see code with line numbers on them. So you can see line 13 in this text file is different to line 13 in this text file. And what this means is with code, merges allow different developers to work on. So we'll go through, I think we've done the introduction here. So we can go through quickly. As I say, I'm Steve Campbell. I went through myself, but this one, people, is a lot of ways to hopefully you've heard this advice before. If not, one of the best pieces of advice is always, especially in enterprise solutions, split out your model versus report. Now, what do I mean by that? This actually happens behind the scenes, really, when you publish any report to the Power BI service. So you have your PBIX file and you publish it. And then what actually happens is you publish both a data set and a report. And you'll probably recognize these symbols if you've seen them on the service. But that data set contains the model, so that's the Power Query and the DAX, and all the back-end data stuff and the relationships. And then the report only is the visuals. And the good advantage of this, one of the main key advantages, is that you can have many different reports off your data set. So once you've created that Power BI model, and most people call it a model, a service will be called a data set, but they're interchangeable, you can then have several reports built off that same data set, which is great to stop people having one report with 100 pages. You can split that up, and you don't have to recreate the model each time, redo the Power Query and the DAX measures, because that can be managed centrally, and any updates can be pushed through to all reports. So what is a model when we call a model file or a data set? Now there's two main areas you can talk about in a model. The first one is going to be the metadata. And this is just a JSON file actually. And if you're familiar with analysis services, you have model.bim file, similar type of thing. And it is information about data sources, tables, formats, all of this. It's basically all the mapping of how things relate, all your DAX measures, or your Power Query, and it just maps everything and how all these different elements relate together. It's going to be quite small because it has nothing to do with the data itself. It's just that mapping on your model, on the relationships you built and the measures. And then, of course, there's the data. So this is what we're most interested about. It's the tables, the rows, the columns, the actual data from your data source it's filling in. And this is, the bit that's large in size in a model. And the important thing here is, that metadata is a code file. It's written in code. It's just a text file. It could be similar to a text file. It's completely code. So what's good about code? Code can be tracked. When we talk about DevOps and Git and version control, what we're normally talking about is code. When I say code, essentially it's text file to its simplest form, some type of text file, maybe saved as a JSON, something like that. But what you can do with these files is you can do things like a difference or a schema compare. If you have two different text files, it's quite easy to compare which lines are different. You'll probably see code with line numbers on them. So you can see line 13 in this text file is different to line 13 in this text file. And what this means is with code, merges allow different developers to work on it at the same time. So I could be working on line 1 to 10. Somebody else could be working on lines 20 to 30. And because we're not working on the same lines of code, we can do this together without interacting with each other. We can implement those lines of code into the same text file at the same time. Now, what this means, in a model file, to put some context to this, is that maybe one person's updating some measures in one table. Another person could be doing some formatting of a different table. As long as these tables are different and we look to merge, when we call merging is to say, hey, has anything that both of these developers, have they crossed paths? Have they worked on the same thing? If they're working completely different tables, then both of these changes can be implemented together without any conflict, because they're different tables, different parts of the code. Now, version control, what we're talking about today, this allows these changes to be rolled back for one and tracked. So every time you want to make a change, it's great to know what changed. For somebody else looking at it, they might not know exactly what you did, so you can add comments, say what you did each time you make that change. And then the best thing about version control, if you mess up, which if you haven't, I think you're lying. We've all done something and realized it's completely wrong. We can just go back and revert to older versions where we knew it was working. So it's safe. It kind of gives you that ability to go back in time to a file without having to think about every change you've made and trying to undo it.
Oh yeah, I mean, I'll just comment like that. There's times where like good development sometimes means breaking something intentionally to see like what exactly it will impact. Just as an observation. Like I certainly know I've taken over models where there's not documentation, and sometimes it's like, all right, I'm not quite sure what this table's used for. I'm going to delete it, see what breaks, and try to actually figure out where in this report it's even being used. But like I'd say that's just part of like good code development, is being able to do, like you said, make a mistake sometimes, but also be able to roll back from that easily.
Yeah, definitely. And you brought a great point there. Saying if you're a new developer, don't assume that you're going to be the only person looking after a report forever. People leave companies and stuff like that. So yeah, different positions. So it's really important for some type of tracking. And as you say, new developer to a new report, they might not know what's happening, or to a new model. So they might do it intentionally or unintentionally. So definitely important there. So that was a model file. The model file with the metadata and which is the code that's kind of tracked, and then the data, which is just the data it's pulling from the source. Now, what is a report file? It's what we call a binary file, so PBIX, those visuals and report bits. We can separate that model out, and that's the back end, the code in it. But the visuals and bookmarks, all these fun things that we actually see, it's a bit of a black box. You can, it is actually a zip file. You can unzip it and view how it's made. Up, but it doesn't contain any documented code. So there is code if you break the report and tear it apart, but this isn't documented. This isn't supported by Microsoft. And this is a big thing, because theoretically you can do some version control, and there's solutions out there which definitely work by doing this. They're pulling the insides of the report out, because everything is code under the hood when you're working on a computer. But I would say be very careful if you ever try to go down that route. It's not really supported by Microsoft. It's not recommended, and because it's not documented, Microsoft could change any of this code and anything they want at any time without really telling anyone. They probably won't, but they definitely do sometimes update the schema of stuff inside the report. So if you try and put this in a enterprise solution, in this way, which is undocumented and unsupported by Microsoft, you might see yourself going down the road and it might just break without warning. So I would just have that big caution if you ever try and do anything like this. And again, Microsoft would tell you not to. So obviously, if we assume that we're not going to do that, then it's a PBIX file, and it's just a file. So we can't do this comparing. We can't do the code compare and work on different parts, because there's only one file. It's just a file. And again, the merge. So that's the difference between a model and a report. And then the final bit for the intro here is I just want to go kind of a couple of terms. Just so that if you haven't heard these before, you're not quite familiar, we know what we're talking about. I definitely did not write these from Microsoft or Wikipedia, but DevOps essentially is the bigger the bigger idea here is a compound of a lot of different tools and operations, processes, technologies. It contains most of this. So you may have heard of Azure DevOps. You can go to Azure DevOps. It has loads of different tools in Azure DevOps, repos like this for tracking version control environments and stuff. It also has boards and sprints and all of this. So it's a larger topic. Kind of, I like to think of it that contains a lot of this. Git, you often hear Git. We think of GitHub probably, which is actually similar to Azure DevOps, but Git itself is the software which really does this version control, this merging, all of that for code. So that's the software. I'm going to put CI/CD. So we'll actually go through this, but this is continuous integration and continuous delivery, which is basically automating a lot of this, essentially having that merging if people are working different parts of code, having it merging it in and doing checks and stuff along the way. So I like to think of the continuous word here, pretty much automating. And there we go, continuous integration. So what is this? Let's just go through quickly kind of what this means, and I'm going to go through a branching strategy. And I'm not going to go really in depth on this, but I want to just show a very high level, because you'll hear this a lot, and just an overview of what this means. Because if you ever use DevOps or GitHub, they'll talk about branching, and it can be quite confusing to a lot of people, because your IT team and your tech team will probably have been doing this for ages. But us as business people, for those who come from a business route, maybe haven't heard of this before. So this is a very, very simplified view of it, but essentially what we have is we call a master branch. And in a way, this is just the product that's in at the end, one that's checked in, and this is all good. This is the one that we're using, the final one. And then what might happen is you might say, oh, there's a small error in this in my model. I need to change it quick. So what you can do is you can start a new branch. And the idea of this is basically, moving this out. We're not going to go and start editing the file that people are viewing, right? We're not going to work on a file that's in production that we're looking at, because we need to test stuff and we need to do stuff. So essentially we copy out a branch. We take things locally. We say, okay, I'll start a branch. What this branch means is this is my, me as a developer, I can take a copy of the code and work on it in isolation. And this is, fixing a bug. So we might have what we call a hotfix branch. And then we might then go along, and now we want a feature branch later on. We're saying, hey, we want to add a new feature. We want to add a new graph into the report. So this is a feature. So this is something we're adding, this feature. So again, we don't want to work on the main one, because what if we make a mistake? We need to test stuff as we're working. So we take a branch, and then we have a merge, right? So the other developer is working on a hotfix, fixes a bug. You might argue that they should merge into feature as well, but this is a simplified version. So that hotfix, that fix has been done. So I'm going to change this. I said, yeah, I fixed a problem. I'm going to merge, and this is one where I was talking about. You can see different developers. We're copying this bit of code I changed into the main one, and then the feature we've done our feature, we've added our graph. Now we're going to merge this into the main one. So really, I like to think of this as just taking copies, working on it by yourself in isolation from the main one, and then you merge it back in. And this is why I talk about those conflicts. If two people have their own branches and both want to merge in, when you come to release it, you can say, oh, these two people, they work on the same thing. There's going to be a conflict because we can compare the code. We can see that they both changed the same lines. Or if they both work on separate things like they should be done, there's no issue, so we can combine both bits of code together. Again, I just want to put this out there. It can be a lot more complicated. Other branching strategies are available. You can see this with loads of branches. So again, if you're interested in this, it's a very, very big topic, but I just wanted to kind of give you the high level, the very, very simple view of kind of what we're talking about. I just wanted to kind of give you the high level, the very, very simple view of kind of what we're on the same thing. There's going to be a conflict because we can compare the code. We can see that they both changed the same lines. Or if they both work on separate things like they should be done, there's no issue, so we can combine both bits of code together. Again, I just want to put this out there. It can be a lot more complicated. Other branching strategies are available. You can see this with loads of branches. So again, if you're interested in this, it's a very, very big topic, but I just wanted to kind of give you the high level, the very, very simple view of kind of what we're talking about. So let's talk about build pipelines. This is quite interesting. Now, this build pipelines there's a lot of confusing branches. So again, if you're interested in this, it's a very, very big topic, but I just wanted to kind of give you the high level, the very, very simple view of kind of what we're talking about. So let's talk about build pipelines. This is quite interesting. Now, this build pipelines there's a lot of confusing terminology here, which I think if you come from a business, it sounds a bit scary, but I want to run through it because it's not really, it's quite, I don't want to say simple, but once we understand it, we know what's happening. So when we execute a pull request, that's just basically kind of merging our code back in. Now, we can do what we call a build pipeline, and this is going to run automatic validations to ensure model is working in order. So what this means is it works on a model. So when we have that code, we can pull it down. Maybe we use Tabular Editor to make some changes. We can merge code back in. And what this does is there's a great video here, which is an hour and a half from Daniel using Tabular Editor that shows you how to set this up. And again, this is more of a how, more of a what, not a how. But yeah, it's an hour and a half he spends on it, and I have to watch it a few times. He's a very smart guy, and there's a lot there.
I'll link the people to the video in the description in the chat window. So
yeah, great, thanks. But what he does is he uses Azure DevOps, which I say is a tool to do this, and he has these 3 steps that more from Daniel validate. Separate. Again, if you're interested in this, it's a very, very big topic, but I just wanted to kind of give you the high level, the very, very simple view of kind of what we're talking about. So let's talk about build pipelines. This is quite interesting. Now, this build pipelines there's a lot of confusing terminology here, which I think if you come from a business, it sounds a bit scary, but I want to run through it because it's not really. It's quite, I don't want to say simple, but once we understand it, we know what's happening. So when we execute pull request, that's just basically kind of merging our code back in. Now, we can do what we call a build pipeline, and this is going to run automatic validations to ensure model is working in order. So what this means is it works on a model. So when we have that code, we can pull it down. Maybe we use tabular editor to make some changes. We can merge code back in. And what this does is there's a great video here, which is an hour and a half from Daniel using tabular editor that shows you how to set this up. And again, this is more of a how, more of a what, not a how. But yeah, it's an hour and a half he spends on it, and I have to watch it a few times. He's a very smart guy, and there's a lot there.
I link the people to the video in the description in the chat window. So
yeah, great, thanks. But what he does is he uses Azure DevOps, which I say is a tool to do this, and he has these 3 steps that, I'm a developer. I've checked my model out. I've made a branch where we check it out. It actually runs the best practice analyzer on your model automatically. If it finds any severe errors, it might say, hey, you can't check this in because you've done something wrong. It also runs a schema check, and it just kind of checks that the columns that you're trying to use, they exist in your source system, and it can run validation deployment. So maybe I've got faulty DAX, and tabular editor on DevOps runs through each of these steps every time you make a change and try and check it in automatically. As a kind of peace of mind that when you check your model in, it's going to work. Cool. And I think this is out of order. It should have been. So we're still talking about the model. But now continuous deployment. So the other part is, we want to check the model out, we want to make changes, and we want to check it back in. But there's also multiple environments, and you hear this a lot, dev, test, production, and this may be, some people might be quite familiar with this, and some maybe if you're, like when I started, I did not know this type of stuff. So there can be more environments, but these are the traditional ones at a minimum. This is for kind of enterprise solutions. So we have what we call the developed environment, and what we mean by environment is in Power BI these could be 3 different workspaces. It's quite common how to think of it. So we want separate workspaces where we're actually going to duplicate things across. And there's a reason for this. So we have a development. This is where our changes are made. So all that work, where I check things out and check it back in, that's all in development. So in this workspace called development, and only us developers can have access to this. The end users, they don't look at this one. It's just for us to check things out, make our changes, and check them in. If, for example, we check it in and those automatic checks and everything looks good, we do what we promote it to test. Pretty much, we copy it from our development workspace, copy it to the test workspace. Now in the test, this is where we surprisingly test. We can have checks on things. Maybe people come in, check that everything that we've done is correct. There might be some automation around this, or we want to check that the numbers are correct. The model changes we did, obviously they were valid in terms of a code standpoint, but are the numbers correct? Is the logic correct behind this? Maybe we want to check some of those things. So is there any bugs? Once we're happy, we say, yeah, this is good. Now let's copy it again to our production workspace. And this is the end workspace with the app that end users see. So what it really does is it lets people edit and test reports before the end users. So you don't want to do this in front of the end users and publish something which is wrong. Because if you keep publishing errors in files, I've been there before, people stop trust your work. They'll just stop using your reports in the end. So it lets us know that what we're doing is working. And there's a couple of different ways we can do this. One is Azure DevOps is a traditional way, and a lot of IT companies use this a lot. So Azure DevOps is just a service by Azure, and it has these environments, and it has code which copies your reports across environments, publishes them to workspaces. Typically used in IT companies who already have Azure DevOps because it's quite complicated to get going.
I had a couple people just ask a few questions or comments around, is this like a premium only feature or not? You want to just elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, so Azure DevOps is separate. It has a cost because it's its own thing specifically set up, not just for Power BI, but for files, any files and any code. We will go to deployment pipelines next, which is a premium only feature.
Yep.
So this is a premium. Let me talk through this one, and then I'll say one for a non-premium way. So what deployment pipelines are, and there's a lot of videos and documentation on it, is you can see this, development, test, production. There are 3 development, test, and production. And what this is these are 3 different workspaces in Power BI, and this is a premium feature. But premium per user as well. If you use it, so end users will need premium per user. And you can see here that we have the development workspace. So in this one, there's 5 data sets, 5 reports, and 5 dashboards. So this is just the demo from Microsoft. What they've done is they've obviously copied this over, and you can see a tick, say this moves to test. And you can literally have this one button where when you're happy to move everything from your development to test, you say I've done all the changes, you click deploy to test, and then it will copy everything over. And you can see by this tick that in test, everything's green and it's all copied over. At this stage of this demo that they were doing, this hasn't been deployed to production yet because there's a yellow X here, meaning they're in the test phase, so they're still testing these 5 reports. You can see they've added a sales drill down and a my food income, so they've added 2 more reports. So obviously in this scenario, they did have 3. They've had a request and they said, add these 2 reports. They've been added in development, and now they're in the test stage and people are testing them out. Once they're happy, they're going to click this deploy to production button. And that's going to copy everything over to the production, and that's when the end users will see them.